Hi, good afternoon. This is Rick Hess, Director of Education Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Great to have all of you with us today for, I think, a timely and hopefully very practical conversation. How conservative parents can help their kids pick the right college. If you're thinking about college today as a parent, as a potential student, or just as a citizen, there's already lots of stuff to be concerned about. There's enormous concerns about cost, about quality, about what's going on campus, about how useful a college education really is. And if you're a conservative, if you're right of center, you've got a whole nother bunch of concerns about whether or not you're sending your child to a place that is going to be respectful of your values, that is going to stand for things that you think are admirable, that is actually going to educate in a way that you find recognizable. Um, as a parent, trying to navigate thousands of post-secondary institutions and all their brochures and websites and carefully rehearsed BS, how do you know what to look for? How do you find a college that's not only going to be a reasonable investment and educationally sound, but one that, as a conservative parent, you're going to feel good about sending your student to? And look, let me just give you a couple of data points as to just how ugly this can be. FIRE conducted an extensive survey last year. One of our panelists, Mike Petrilli, has done some terrific work writing about it, in which they surveyed students at a couple of hundred campuses across the country. Liberal-leaning colleges and universities outnumbered conservative-leaning ones 228 to 29. There were two schools, Kenyon College and Pitzer College, where only one student identified as conservative. That was better than Macalester, where zero students identified as conservative. Across the 228 predominantly liberal selective campuses, the ratio was 7-1 liberal to conservative. We know that conservative students are much more likely to self-censor in class and on campus, more than twice as likely as their liberal peers. And in fact, a survey of students at Northwestern University and University of Michigan, 88% of students said they pretended to have more progressive views in order to get by academically and socially. So look, campuses are not necessarily hospitable places for students who come from right-leaning families. What do you do about that? Well, fortunately today, we've got three folks who have both professional and very personal expertise in navigating this, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of them. We've got Mike Petrilli, the president of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. Mike's oldest son is a senior in high school in Montgomery County, Maryland, not exactly a hotbed of conservative thought. His dream school is West Point, but is also looking at Dartmouth and Washington and Lee. We have with us Jenna Axelson. Jenna is the head elect of the Wilberforce School, a classical Christian K-12 school in Princeton, New Jersey. She recently served as Wilberforce's Director of Advancement. Jenna just dropped her daughter off as a freshman this fall at Baylor University Honors College and has another daughter who is a junior in high school and is just starting to look at her college options. And we have with us Erica Sanzi, Director of Outreach at Defending Education. Erica has two sons who attend college in the Northeast and one who is currently applying to college. For those of you who are not familiar with Defending Education, it has a bunch of resources for conservatives trying to make sense of the college search, including a list of questions that parents and grandparents should be sure to ask. And Erica, I'm going to want to talk about some of those, if that's all right. But Mike, maybe you can kick us off. You and I have known each other a very long time, since your high school senior was, you know, a newborn. And it's interesting that he's a very conservative high schooler in a very liberal community looking at these options. And you were a parent who's also written about this,
Mhm.
um, for Forbes, for your own Fordham Gadfly, about these imbalances in higher ed and how to navigate them. Can you offer a few initial thoughts just from your personal experiences and drawing on some of your writing?
Sure. Thanks, Rick. Well, first of all, it's great to be here. I know that some of my friends, including Erica, will say, what is Mike doing here? He's such a squish. Does he even count as a conservative?" Center right, I think I can claim, and my son, yes,
For a
he's a
big
few
tent,
notches.
there's parents that can grandparents
Yeah,
across
and, and
the
and my son is a few notches to my right. Maybe growing up in very liberal Montgomery County, Maryland, helped to do that to him. Uh, I have, as Rick said, written about this. I found the fire survey, I guess, about, well, maybe a year ago. And it's fascinating. And to have a survey where kids can confidentially disclose their ideological leanings, super helpful. And like you say, it is not easy to find a school that is balanced, much less one that leans conservative. Now, with my son, like most kids, I'm sure he's got lots of different things that he's interested in, lots of different factors. I don't think the politics of the school is at the top, but I also think that not wanting to be, outnumbered as a conservative 10 to 1, that is something that he is concerned about as well. You mentioned West Point. Uh, it would be such an honor and amazing if he is admitted. That's a big process. We will see. These other schools he's looking at are fantastic schools too, and also reaches. So who knows? But I do think that as we've gone through the process, some things have become clear. One is some of the conventional wisdom. You mentioned those stats. Look, Rick, it is true that if you're looking at highly selective colleges, it is hard to find colleges that are conservative or even balanced. There are a few. Hillsdale, of course, highly selective and conservative. Villanova, according to the fire survey, leans to the right. And then there's five schools, and I can talk about them if you want, that are pretty balanced. But
I
otherwise, if
think
you're
people
talking
will be
about,
curious. What are the five?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay, good. Well, so the five, first of all, two Catholic schools, Notre Dame and Boston College. Okay. Then you've got Washington and Lee, which is a small liberal arts college in Virginia, Wake Forest, and the University of Miami. And that's it. Okay. And then you look at all these other, Ivy League, Ivy Plus, the super selective liberal arts colleges, uh, very unbalanced. And so, we've been to a bunch of these schools, and I'll be interested in hearing Jenny and Erica talk about their experiences. Look, they are certainly still very woke, and uh, but I think some of the conventional wisdom is that if you want to find balance, it's hard to do it at the selective schools. Go south. It sounds like that's something that the Axelsons already did. You go south, you go to red states, lots of great state schools. Many cases, the flagship schools or maybe the agricultural schools that have very good balance on those campuses. And of course, going to religious schools is another way that you're going to get a student body that tends to be more conservative.
So that is true. It's not a myth that if you look at, say, the big SEC flagships, that these schools are more balanced
They
than the
they
Northern
they
Conference.
yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I'll say, and there's been a lot of written about this where I am in Montgomery County, Maryland. I think this is happening all over the Mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast. A lot of kids are going south. They know, like, if you don't want to go to a woke school, if you want to go have fun, join a fraternity and sorority and not be told that you're a terrible person, go to those SEC schools. I will say, though, that you can find even in some blue states. I think Washington State, for example, is on the list as relatively balanced. There are, so all over the country, uh, as long as you're not going to the super selective schools, I think you can find schools that are relatively balanced.
Jenna, now you're in an interesting position because you're obviously helping lots of families every year
Hmm.
navigate this. You've just been through this.
Hmm.
Um, Wilberforce has a college admissions handbook online, which I
Yeah.
think is designed to be helpful with this.
Hmm.
Can you talk us through a little bit? What have you observed? How did you and your daughter make your choice? What what do you advise parents in your school as you're helping them with these challenges?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. Maybe I'll talk first from personal perspective and then add a little bit more professional what we do here at our school. But with our own daughter, I think she was really looking for an institution that was big enough to offer her opportunities, and especially in areas that she wanted to study, big enough to offer what she hoped to be a diversity of thought, but also somewhere where she felt like she could live out her values that she had at home and at her school and at her church. So there were, as a family, there are things that we looked at. To us, we think about college not just about getting a job or, a salary profile, but we really see it as a bridge to adulthood, an area where she could really mature. So we spent a lot of time looking at the adults at each of the institutions that we were going to. I mean, who are the people that are going to influence her in her life? Who are the professors? Who's involved in campus life? Who's involved in the different campus ministries that will have an impact on the adult she becomes? Spend time looking at course catalogs. What type of courses are offered? What diversity of courses are offered, especially in the humanities departments when you're looking at history and literature courses? Are they really engaging in critical thought and historical thought, or is it really skewed towards a certain political or social agenda? Are they veering away from education into indoctrination, or is there really diversity of thought? And then we
And can you
spent a
get
lot of
that?
go
Can
ahead.
you get that from a close reading of course catalogs, or is it hard to tell?
Well, I think you can have a sense, especially if you visit and you talk with students that are attending classes, and you can ask what classes were offered to you, what classes are you part of? Um, and yes, I think sometimes the titles can also give you a sense of um, what, at Baylor, they really have, there are schools that have like great books or sort of civics courses where you get a sense that there's a real willingness to wrestle with ideas and historical ideas. And I think the other thing we really looked at as well is just what the campus life looks like. What type of, activities and are offered, what type of campus ministries are offered, what type of, what does campus life look like as far as clubs. So that kind of guided our thought personally for our daughter. For our institution, we really do encourage families to go and visit, to talk to people, to look at to take the, admissions tour, as you said there, rehearsed BS. But really, the campus tour does highlight what the school thinks is really important to them. Like, who's giving the tour? What type of students is the institution choosing to publicly represent their school on their tours? What are they highlighting? We ask them if they're interested in a specific, we tell our families if you're interested in a specific area of study to get into that department, speak to some of the professors, have an opportunity to meet with a student maybe who's also studying there and get to, ask them about their experience, what their class has been like. Spend time in the town, spend time on campus, go to the library, hang out for a little while and get the vibe. What's important to that school? What do they really like?
Mm. Mm. Erica, you've got two boys in college right now. You and I have talked about this a bunch of times over the years. I mean, they did not choose these schools for political reasons, I don't believe. So how do you think about this as, a mom who has, pretty traditional values and has raised her kids that way? How do you think about whether schools are a good match?
My sense is that Mike Petrilli's son would get along well with my boys. When I hear all the talk about Gen Z boys sort of moving to the right or just sort of, fleeing I mean, I would never say they fled the Democratic Party. That's not how they think, but certainly, um, and also because we live in a very blue state, so it's not like they haven't sort of already been surrounded by a lot of this, whatever the word is, whether it's social justice ideology or whether it's just sort of like liberalism that's gone a little bit further than we ever thought possible. So it's like they live in that, but they're not that, and their friends aren't, and like their people aren't. And so I suspect part of it was there wasn't any sort of, it wasn't going to be strange to them to be around it at school. I also say you really have to know your own kids, right? So like I would put mine in the category of like fully inoculated. If anything, I would actually say they're part of the backlash in ways. So I don't worry about, like we just dropped off my son, my freshman, and, the RA, I suspect, puts the little things on the doors to the dorm and you put your names and your pronouns. And like, they're never going to he's never going to write his pronouns on the door. Neither are his football teammate roommates. But it's like they blow it off. Like they don't, like I'm actually the one that can get a little bit more indignant, whereas they've been answering questions about their pronouns for years now, and they just like they think it's stupid and they don't care. So, and that it did happen. So my sons made choices for very specific reasons. You guys may know that Northeastern University is well known for its co-op program. That's where they are literally not matriculated for a semester and they work full time in something related to their field of study. They get paid market wages. And it's this idea that you get experience and often the networking opportunity is such that lots of kids will graduate and ultimately get hired from one of the places that they worked. Well, my son was never talked about Northeastern. He was going to go to University of Florida, which, by the way, the tour guide at University of Florida immediately gave her pronouns because I wasn't on the trip. So my family kept texting me like who was and wasn't giving pronouns on the tours. But my son said that that tour guide was by far the best he ever had. She was one of the smartest people he had ever had give a presentation to him. Like she was amazing, right? Whereas at Boston College, we had such a horrendous tour guide that I was like, I don't know how anybody could apply to this school after having this tour guide. Like she didn't know anything about the school. So he wanted the co-op program. So as soon as he found out about it, he changed all of his plans. And suddenly he wasn't interested in Villanova. He wasn't interested in Florida. He wasn't interested in Georgia. It was Northeastern. Like, what? And he loved his co-op so much, you guys, this past spring, that he has taken a leave of absence from college to accept a full-time job with this company. It's like a startup. It's all sports related. It's like he said he couldn't write a better script for himself. So he, for right now, is out. And we are saving an unexpected large amount of money. My other one is a football player. So that was what drove his decision. I want to play football in college. That means the SEC was out. So he's playing Division III football at WPI in Worcester, which is like a real like technical school. What is this? Worcester Polytech. And he got lucky that the school he was really liking the best at the camps and the coach and one of the things the coach says in the parent meetings that I love is he says, like, we're all about developing good football players, but we're much more about developing good husbands and fathers. Would you think you'd hear that at a school in Massachusetts? Like, so it's a weird mix. You cannot like people want to sort of like sort everything into these like neat buckets. It does not work like that at all. And so, yeah, that's been my experience. And the only last thing I would say is like, there are schools where I think it's easier to find your people or not schools. I'm sorry, like activities. So if you are an athlete or if you are going to do sorority fraternity stuff, like it's just going to be easy and quick to sort of find people. My son found at Northeastern, which if you've been looking at the numbers of international students at colleges, like they're at the tippy top of that. And like my son would tell you, it felt like an international place. It was not the kind of place where you were going to have people on the hallway of your dorm that were likely to be like kids that you had a lot in common with. Like it was just a very different experience. And that was a downside for sure.
So this is all, there's something I want to go right down the rabbit hole on that you just flagged. First, if we'll take questions throughout. So if you're with us and you want to share a question, there's two ways to do it. One, you can hit us at hashtag AEI College Search on X. That's hashtag AEI College Search. The other is you can email christopher.robinson@aei.org. christopher.robinson@aei.org. Either way, they'll get the questions to me, and we'll do what we can to get them answered. Erica, one of the things you just flagged, which I think runs through what all three of you said, is it seems to me there's at least two ways to think about kind of the right-left thing at campus. One is that there's this cultural element that you want to be in an environment where there's some people who talk like you do, who have touchstones that you have. Another is that there's a point at which another is to look for an explicitly conservative kind of pedagogical or curricular agenda, that you're looking for great books, that you're worried about the way in which wokeness has corrupted kind of the instructional core. Can you guys help if you're a parent, grandparent, you're trying to think about, well, I want to make sure I'm not sending my kid to a school where the education is compromised. But look, you've got to learn to be around people who might see things like, how do you figure out which is which and what are the cues you can look for?
The first thing I would say is it really does matter what you're planning to study. If you are going into engineering or, finance or whatever those sort of more left-brained pursuits are, it's there to varying degrees. And even within that world, like I was going to mention, maybe if we have time later, like you can even see within a STEM schools, you can just see some that are heavily infused with DEI throughout and others that are not. But for the most part, a lot of kids are going to take, if they're not interested in this sort of social justice, whatever all that stuff is, that lives in the humanities, right? Like for a lot of kids, they're going to check the box of their requirements and they're going to get out. So that certainly is one thing that I would say. The other thing, I guess, I'm going to leave it there because I actually just kind of forgot the question.
I'll jump in.
Oh yeah, please, Jenna. Thanks.
Erica, I had the exact same experience on our visit to the University of Florida as well. Just a great tour guide, really someone who was open to diversity of thought. A lot of the schools I toured, I'd even ask our tour guide, do you go to church? Do you know anyone who goes to church? Not because I expected them to go to church, but I just want to know, how do they respond to that? But I agree with you that it does.
What kind of responses did you get, Jenna?
Well, at the University of Florida was a good one. She didn't, but she was like, oh yeah, I know people who do that. That's nice, normal part of our culture here. But then others, it would be like, I don't know, maybe there's a bus or something. I'm not sure. But Erica, what I was going to say is I agree it depends on what your child's going to study for them, of course. But the reason why I think it's important is because you want to know, is there a diversity of thought amongst the faculty at the institution? Like, is the institution just so narrow and insular that it doesn't matter what you're studying, you're only going to kind of get one indoctrination. And that's why I think it's important, even if your child's not looking to study that. Our daughter's majoring in biology. She's on a pre-med track. But I did want to know what kind of faculty are around on campus, and does the institution allow a diversity of thought, even outside and inside of different departments?
And how do you, so you mentioned talking to students, kind of looking at course catalog, are, you do this in a K-12 environment. Every year you're sending another batch of 12th graders off. How do you help families kind of get a read on this faculty and that kind of breadth of thought?
Yeah, and it does depend on the student. If you are looking for a highly selective school, we would encourage them to find their people. Make sure there's a group on campus that you can be a part of, or make sure that there's a church nearby if that's what they're looking for. So it's not true for everyone. It does depend what kind of school the student is looking for. But we would say, hey, what kind of majors do they offer? Look at their course catalogs. Talk to people in the department. Those are things we would encourage our families to do on our college visits.
And what about, I certainly hear from plenty of like parents and grandparents who say, well, I mean, what do you mean? Do I just call up the college and say, can I talk to the sociology department? Like, what do you do? How do you do this?
Yes. Yeah. Well, first of all, depending on if you're someone who's religious, there are lots of people who their full-time job is to help your college-age student grow spiritually. They're in all kinds of campus ministries. You can Google them. You can say Boston College, Christian ministries, their cell phone numbers, their emails will be up there, and you can get in touch with them. We did that. We would meet with individuals and we'd ask about the school. We'd ask, can you connect us with a professor? Can you help us meet somebody in such and such department? So yes, I think you can do that. And then when you're scheduling visits, a lot of colleges will allow you to meet within a certain department, someone within that department, or you can ask your admission. They have admissions directors that you can meet with, and you can ask them, hey, can we meet with somebody in the literature department, the education department, I don't know, chemistry department.
So families can do this before they're admitted. You're saying on that initial college visit
Families should do it
Okay,
on their
great.
college visits, I think.
Yeah. And I would just add, and of course, this is the policy wonk version here, is that there are some of these organizations that have tried to measure these sorts of things. So FIRE, as you mentioned, a great group that does look at, based on surveys, that same survey that allowed students to say where they lean ideologically also asked those students, how comfortable do you feel expressing different points of views? And is there a good debate on campus? And so that's really great, really great information, as well as looking at, does the university sign what's called the University of Chicago statement related to free speech on campus? There's various ways that universities can decide, hey, are we going to go out of our way to be welcoming? And of course, under pressure from the Trump administration right now, some are doing more than perhaps they were a year or two ago. I mean, I noticed at Dartmouth, for example, just the other day, George Will wrote a column. No, it wasn't. Was it George Will? No, it was Mitch Daniels who wrote a column about the president at Dartmouth, really saying that she had handled the Hamas protests really well. She shut those down immediately. She's worked sincerely and even before this administration to make strides in creating a more welcoming community there. I mean, I think that is meaningful and that can make a difference. One thing I would add to these great comments from Erica and Jenna is, I have entered this world all of a sudden where I'm learning about the military and the military academies and ROTC. I didn't have any background in that. My family was never involved in that. As a high school kid, I never in a million years would have thought about it. It's incredible, and so my son's looking at the military academies. He's also looking at ROTC scholarships. And you think about ROTC on these campuses, which is all over the country. Again, a great way to find your people. I mean, I know Pete Hegseth says sometimes he thinks the military has gone woke, but come on. You put the ROTC guys up against the sociology departments. I think you're going to be in much better shape with ROTC, and that's everywhere. And by the way, a great way to pay for college, but also to find your people.
Mike, you wrote a column the other day, for instance, about your son's high school football team and the coaching, and same point that Erica made, that, the WPI, a coach who's talking about being a good husband, a good father, being kind of goal one. The coach, your son's coach had some similar notes.
Yeah.
Partly, that seems like of a piece with your ROTC comment, that partly this is about viewing looking for parts of colleges that take character formation seriously, that are about self-discipline, about growing young men and women of character. One thing we all wind up in these conversations, and parents will ask me, okay, well, I know University of Austin's a possibility, or Hillsdale, or a great book school, but that seems to be a little different from what we're talking about. If you're not necessarily looking for a great books program, but you're looking for a college where at least your kid can have that kind of mentoring and character development. So one thing is you can look for pockets of it, like we've said, but how do you look for colleges where there's maybe more of that, or that's more in the DNA?
Yeah, no, I would love to hear Erica's, because again, I feel a little bit like, hey, I'm just going through this right now. So I want to learn that also. It is hard. You get little tidbits. Of course, you got to go visit. It is amazing. We've talked about this, how much those tour guides matter. I mean, and I remember reading about how some universities have finally invested in trying to improve the training and the program to, because that is how many young people do we know? Remember our time when we were looking at this many, many years ago, having a positive experience with a tour guide makes a huge difference, a negative one likewise. I would just say at these big campuses, uh, where maybe it's not a Hillsdale, it's not a great books, but you're trying to find your people, they're out there. And, we've talked about sports, we've talked about the military, we've talked about church. I mean, I think that the same sorts of groups that maybe your young person has found in high school is how do you kind of replicate that in college? Maybe you're not playing D3 football, but you can play intramurals and you can join a fraternity and you can join ROTC. I mean, these are the kinds of things you can do.
Erica.
I mean, I think it's really hard. I think it depends on the school too. I think like again, I'll go back to Northeastern. Like, I don't think he was going to find that there. I really don't. I just think it was too big, too international. Not, I think you, if it, I don't see, I think the coach in the case of football plays a huge role. And in this case, I just think also we have a specifically like a coach that like maybe talks about it more than others. I don't know. I think to Mike's point, the ROTC would also make a big difference. Certainly if you were involved in a faith community, which most schools have, that would definitely make a difference. But when I think of my oldest at Northeastern, I just don't think that he was going to find that there. And he left. So we'll see what happens. It's actually funny, just a story about tour guides. I think part of the problem is and I don't know how they would ever do this, but like there's no matching where like a tour guide is going to be relatable or resonate with the kids on the tour. So my son and husband ended up peeling off from the tour they were on because they could not handle this tour guide, and they joined because there's always different groups walking around all at once, so you can easily peel off from one, just like join another one because they assign you. And I'm going to be blunt right now, this is like a Gen Z typical, kid, loves sports, watches sports on the weekends, like too into sports betting, like whatever, loves to work that, like, and he had a tour guide. It was like, like kind of like the purple hair and the tank top and no bra and like combat boots, and like that just wasn't the right fit for him to get a sense of the school. Now, if you have a kids where like they're like, hell yeah, like I dress just like this girl, like she'd be the perfect tour guide. So I think part of the problem isn't that the tour guides it's that you don't get to like share a few things that they could maybe match up, so that if like, so I don't know, so like a kid who plays baseball or something could have been the tour guide for him instead of a girl that to him represented sort of like what he didn't like or want. So it's not that one is good and bad, it's that they're totally incompatible. The other thing I would say is I think that the University of Austin, the Hillsdale, and what was the third one you said? Was it Liberty? I forget. But like most kids don't really even know about those schools. Like they do feel very niche-y, and they feel very niche-y with like the kind of our crowd or the online crowd or the wonky crowd. So I think that like part of it is like for a lot of us, like we're not, those aren't even on the table. Because if you were to, hand that pamphlet to your kids, they'd be like, what even is this? Like, I'm not going here. And again, it's not a knock against them, but they are unique, different, special, whatever. And I don't find the people that are kind of like out there just always pushing those, like the only way that a conservative can feel okay about their kid going to college is if they go to, one of these three places. Because in most cases, like their kids aren't even probably going to want to go there. So that's just a little thing I thought I'd say to make some people mad.
Well, Erica, I do feel though that the tour guides that schools choose, this is a public statement about what's important to your institution. And it needs to be someone who is intellectually curious, who can talk across differences, who doesn't shut someone down immediately, either through their appearance or their lack of knowledge. Like I do think who you put in front of that crowd coming to see the school makes a big difference, and they should demonstrate a broadness that's approachable. to all families.
I agree with the broadness part. I'm just like thinking of like the kids who I know who like don't like jocks. Like they don't want to be led around. You know what I mean? So it's like they want, like they might be like the kid who wants to do all the theater programs.
Yeah.
So I do agree that there's a certain level of presentability, and I do think schools are falling down on that big time. Not only is the presentability, but they put kids out there that don't know anything about the school. I mean, can't even answer the most basic questions
to parents who are paying astronomical tuitions.
Oh yeah, no, it's bad. I'm telling you, I almost wrote a letter. I mean, I don't complain. I almost wrote like an email to Boston College because I was like, what even is this?
So you guys have got me convinced that if my kid's going to be ROTC or play ball, or is active in our faith, we can probably find a place
And fraternities. Don't forget the fraternities.
But I'm curious, for a lot of these kids who are maybe, a lot of parents or grandparents who might have their kids, they're like, oh, he's more of a theater kid, or she wants to study communications, or wants to do human, and isn't necessarily like a great books kid, but like, how do we, what do you say to those folks? What are things to look for? What are institutions you'd suggest? What are questions to ask?
Yeah, I think that it doesn't just have to be those pockets. Like we've had students who have gone to more liberal universities who worked in like their communication department, did their social media, did photography for the school, helped with communications. And you adapt to the environment you're in, but you also need to be in space where you don't have to be driven by DEI principles, where you can say, okay, I'm going to take pictures of this event without creating the look that you're asking me to create. And I think there are it doesn't have to be that there are only those things, but you can also have, I don't know, pro-life groups on campus alongside other groups on campus. You can have young Republicans on campus alongside your other groups. It's that are there a variety of activities being offered that your child could look at and say, oh, okay, I might not want this one, but I do want that one. And it's active. It doesn't just have one or two kids in it. That's the other thing we encourage parents to do is look at the Instagram page or the social media page for different activities you want your child to be a part of, and see how many kids are in the pictures. And if it's just the same 4 kids in every single picture, that's a clue. That's not a very robust community, and you might feel isolated.
Is there somebody, Jenna, either like in your high school guidance counselor office or like on campus, who can give you a sense of some of these things like clubs, and like the real scoop, rather than just like, here's the clubs that technically exist?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the school builds more relationships with different institutions, yes. And then as our alumni attend different institutions, that also helps because you have a network to talk to. And then some of you just need to do your own sleuthing online.
So if parents, if a student comes in or a parent reaches out to say the guidance office, what are the odds that like at your school or like at other schools like that, that you'll be able to help the parents? Is that something where you're like, yeah, we have some insight, or is that something that's hard for you to answer?
Again, I think it depends on what institution they're looking at. If we already have a relationship or we've had students that have gone there, or we know a few people that, our professors are working there, then yes, we have a good inside scoop. But as you mentioned, there's thousands of institutions across the nation. So it depends.
And what's the best way for parents to reach out to you if they are trying to get some suggestion? Like how do they best reach out in a way that you don't just feel like overwhelmed, or that they get a quick kind of, look, I'm juggling 7 things right now?
Yes. I guess they could email me and say AI webinar in the subject line.
Mike, what kind of reaction have you gotten when you've written about the imbalance, or when you talked, you and the fire folks, I think, did something on like, what, how much of the reaction is from folks saying, oh gosh, this is useful to know? How much of it is angry pushback from the higher ed community?
Yeah, it's interesting, Rick. First of all, I think that people make the case, and it's true, that we can be in a coastal bubble sometimes when there's conversation. And of course, we've had a ton of this in policy wonk land this year about woke campuses. It's most extreme at this very small number of very selective colleges. Now, those colleges and universities matter a lot. They produce a lot of future leaders. They get a lot of attention and money. And so, the media pays attention to them, but that is not representative of the larger picture. This point that actually, if you want a politically balanced, ideologically balanced campus, it's not hard to find. It's just when you want one that is also highly selective that it becomes more difficult. And so, people on the left can say, see, colleges aren't that woke. And there's some truth to that. Most state schools aren't, crazy woke. At least the student population is not crazy tilted in a liberal direction. It tends to be more balanced. And I think that's important. I think on the right, I think it's eye-opening, and everybody wants to know, why the heck are some of these schools, what are they doing to actually be well balanced? I mean, I think we can all explain Notre Dame, Boston College, but like Wake Forest, University of Miami, I don't know. I'd still love to send some journalists in there to say, are they doing something on purpose? Washington and Lee, likewise, another school my son's really interested in. Is it geography? Is it something else? Or have they done something purposely to try to make it clear that they are welcoming to kids from throughout the political spectrum? I don't know the answer to that, and I would love to know.
All right, so let me take some of the questions that have come in. One, when your child is applying, are there things to worry about in terms that might disadvantage them if they're flagged as having the wrong views or conservative views?
Yeah, like their parents do panels about higher education as a favor to Rick Hess. No, I can think of an example right now when the application, I think it's the Common App, but you don't have to put your pronouns. But my kids, who again I've described, right? There was no way they were not going to do that, because they felt like if they did not do that, it would be a negative. The way that they see that in the world is like, you have to go along with it on these official documents, or else it's like a red flag against you. And so that's the thing that I find annoying about a lot of this, is it's like the kids who think it's stupid, don't believe in it, like literally think it's ludicrous, they comply. And they comply because they're working within a framework, which is, I have a goal. And in order for me to get from like A to B to C, I have to check these boxes. So with the exceptions of like the contrarian types, and perhaps all of us right here would fall into that box, but that's like a pretty small bucket. Like for a lot of students, they're like, I'm just not going to be a contrarian in my college application process. And what was funny was that when my oldest like first had his first, like somebody was going to help him, it was somebody at school, and they were like, okay, it's our first little session to work on your college essay. And they said to my white, like straight, cis, heteronormative son, so most people write about their identity, so do you want to do that? And he was like, I don't really think that's going to work in my case. But like, it's like that same, like that kind of weird mentality. Those two things jump to mind right away for me.
Jenna, I imagine you probably have to help students kind of navigate this at school. Any things you've seen?
I'd agree with some of what Erica said, just feeling like you're working within a framework that in order to be a part of the system, you have to play the game by those rules. I think where our students will find challenges, some of the essay questions or areas where they feel like they're pushed to express things differently than they would. They're very thoughtful about how they phrase things.
Is there an example that comes to mind?
Nothing that I'm going to
Okay.
no.
And what do Mike.
But this is it. It's the essays, right? And it's this question. I mean, I at one point told my son, when there was the diversity, it's, either the diversity question, or it's like, tell us about a time when you've had to express an unpopular view, or, I'm like, oh, you should talk about what it's like being a conservative in Montgomery County, Maryland. And he's like, oh no, everybody says don't do that. right? It's too high risk. You just want to, this is not a place for you to try to be interesting and to stand out in that way, even though, there are colleges out there saying we really care more about viewpoint diversity. And so I think this is something to wrestle with from an admissions and even policy perspective. How can these schools do a better job? Because right now the kids just don't want to take risks for understandable reasons, and so they're just going to kind of play it straight.
And just because your president put out a letter, an official letter talking about, like the Dartmouth president put out, that they embrace the free exchange of ideas and free speech, and we're an educational institution, not a political one. That doesn't mean the admissions person reading the essays even saw that letter or agrees with it. I mean, for all we know, that admissions person is out protesting the president's letter. So I think that's why the kids get really gun shy, because they might be like, well, yeah, the school has put out some interesting, like some proclamations lately about these things I care about, but that doesn't mean that the person in charge of my fate, agrees with that. So it's like they don't want to take any risks and they don't want to rock the boat in this realm.
My colleague Sam Abrams has done survey work pointing out that the most liberal people on college campuses are like the student life staff, the folks who work supporting students. And so that a lot of the stuff that, right-leaning parents or students can find troubling isn't actually even necessarily academic or in classrooms. It's in dormitories and it's the programming to support. I don't know. I mean, how do you get a read on this, Jen? This is probably something you've encountered, I imagine. How do you get a read on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's why I was like, you really need to visit and get a sense of the vibe. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. And that isn't, you get a little bit of that when you do the admissions tour, as I mentioned. Who are they putting as their public face? What are they showing you? But really, you get that when you are going to stay with a student or go to class or talk to someone who went there. Though that's how you get a sense of that. And definitely the student life or the campus life, you want to know, can you find your people or not?
And obviously, a lot of families they're going to approach college tours this fall as, it's a chance to spend some time with your kid. It's a
Yes.
family event. You do the campus walkthrough, and then you all go do something fun. But does that suggest that it's good for the student to have a couple of hours on campus, kind of in dorms or libraries or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, we recommend families, what you said, do the campus tour together, go visit a library, get something to eat nearby. But we do encourage students, if they are interested, to go back and spend some time with the student, or to stay longer and spend some time with the student who's there, or meet with somebody in individual departments to get a better sense of what the campus life is like. And I think, what you said is really important, Rick. There's no wasted time when doing college visits. That's like really important time with your child to get a sense of what they value, what's important to them, and to reinforce what's important to your family. There's never a wasted college visit.
Um, Another question. Is it safe to presume that a institution with a great books curriculum is going to be friendly to conservatives?
It depends what's important to them. One thing I discovered, or not discovered, but I've been thinking about a lot this week, is that everybody has a different big thing, right? So like if your big thing is that they teach great books or whatever, then it's probably a win. But if your big thing is that they, allow students to self-identify into restrooms, locker rooms, and dorms based on their gender identity, like if seriously, I'm being serious now, like if your big thing is the fear, or for whatever, like there are people who have kids that have been ensnared in this sort of ideology. And so when you're thinking about sending your child off to school, that may be your big thing, right? Like your big thing, I think, varies person to person and family to family. So I think that for some people, the great books is going to be the perfect fit for them as a conservative family. I think for other people, since we know that some of the great book schools do the gender stuff is no different there than anywhere else. Someone else might be like, yeah, no, like I'm not, that's not going to work for me. And I think that,
Is that the case, Erica? Some of these great book schools are still
oh
kind
yeah.
of culturally woke?
Oh yeah, you can see like names of like famous, I want to say it was Marcus Aurelius. You can see like famous characters from the books with he, him, like next to their name. So like, and again, like I always worry about like, I always feel like we make mistakes sometimes where we assume that what's most important to us is most important to to everybody else. But like really everyone's coming at it with their own life experience, not lived experience. No, I'm just kidding. I guess it fits. And so again, like I really do think that matters. And I don't like, and I think that even within a family, you might have one child where you're like, they're fine, doesn't matter where they go, they're totally like inoculated to this stuff, they're not going to go down that rabbit hole. You may have another child who is so high in empathy that you may just feel like this stuff kind of could prey on their high empathy, and like that could almost be like weaponized against them. And I could have a child who's like, well down the road into this madness. So again, like I think it's not just families, I think it's specific kids within families.
Mm. Mm. We've talked a couple times, well, I think I brought them up. There's a couple of name brand schools that, folks always bring up to me. If you're off talking to a group and they're like, what schools would, and I'm like, well, what are you looking at? And they'll always say Hillsdale if if we're having this conversation. And now they'll always say the University of Austin. And, these things become kind of shorthand, whether or not they actually address these questions have been flagged. I mean, if you want to give people kind of a shortcut version of some institutions that should be on their list that might not be those immediate name brands, what are some other institutions that you would just encourage folks to make sure they're looking at as part of that first tranche?
Purdue comes up all the time. Purdue comes up all the time as a really, really good school that conservatives really like. If you compare them to Carnegie Mellon, for example, like Purdue has sort of like said, like we're kind of like they're not doing the DEI stuff. Carnegie Mellon is proudly expanding their DEI stuff. It's embedded in so much of what they do. So even though you have these two really selective, great schools, they are wildly different in terms of how much they're emphasizing and focusing on that. So that would be an example. And I have to say too, like parents of kids at SEC schools tend to be very happy, including the ones whose kids were like superstar students and just were like, I got to get off the crazy train. Like if they were from Montgomery County, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, whatever. Some of them are like, they could have gone to these top selective schools and they were just like, I just want something different. And so like, I have a friend whose two kids are down at the SEC, and it's like, if you do the honors program, like you can still, whatever it is people think you can't get there, that you can get other places, like you can. And you can also have a really fun, normal experience at a school where the school spirit is like a school-wide thing, versus some of these other places that seem to almost like pride themselves on dividing people up into these identity groups. So that gives you a very different feel on the campus.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Jenna. Yeah.
I was just going to share a couple of schools that our students have had, good experience at: University of Virginia and Emory.
Interesting. Yeah, and I was going to say again, conventional wisdom, but for Catholic parents, Notre Dame, of course, such an amazing place. I have a niece who graduated a few years ago. She's already married, has a baby, and it is incredible. And people know that, of course, being a Catholic school doesn't mean that you're going to be conservative. Georgetown is famously liberal. I think Notre Dame probably most to the right, and then you've got, as I mentioned before, Villanova, Boston College, somewhere in between. But these are great institutions as well. And with Notre Dame, as a national, I think it's in probably about number 15 on the national university rank. Incredible sports, beautiful campus. So that hits a lot of buttons for a lot of people.
This is a point that came up before, but I really do want to put a button on it. especially the folks on this webinar. I suspect a number of them have interacted with some college presidents, have had a chance to see some of them speak. And this question came up of how much, if you're impressed by the college president, when Mitch Daniels ran Purdue, um, how much should that influence your choice? How much does that actually matter for kind of what happens in a college campus? I guess I'm asking you this with more of your wonk hats on. Um, how much how much weight should folks put on, wow, that college president was really impressive, or boy, I was not impressed by that by him or her.
I mean, I would just say I don't think it matters a whole lot. I wouldn't put too much weight in that, especially, I mean, maybe if they've been there a long time, if you have reason to believe that they've really have driven a set of values deep into the institution. But that strikes me as be something that would be quite rare.
The one
Jen?
time, Rick, the one time recently that I feel like this mattered was when, remember, colleges and universities were putting out statements about every single like event that was happening, especially if there was any sort of like racial or ethnic coding. And so October 7th, I think, was a time where people really were scanning and looking to see, did the president put out a statement? And if so, what did it say? And I think some schools really surprised us in a good way. I would put Northeastern actually on that list. I was very happy with what they put out. And I think a lot of schools really let people down. So sometimes it's not what are they saying? I think sometimes it's what are they not saying that can be more informative when it comes to college presidents and those official communications.
All right. Last question. I want to give you, and we'll close with this. I want to give you guys each a chance to respond to it. Question asks, a lot of parents have long felt pressured to send their kids to the most elite institution possible. Yale, Harvard, Stanford, and so on. It feels like that might be changing, that the consequences of making other choices are less severe. Can you guys speak to that? Has that been a pressure in your mind that parents have really felt? And is that changing in a way that allows for more measured decisions?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt there's been pressure in certain communities. Again, this is a bubble, kind of a coastal thing, right? I can see it. I see it here in DC, of course. And then, when I'm with my colleagues, we do a lot of work in Ohio, and it's just a completely different culture. Like the people, for the most part, people aren't thinking about the Northeastern schools or those kinds of schools, and their kids do great, right? And the data coming out seems to indicate that, yes, if you go to one of these elite schools, maybe you get an extra lottery ticket, but it's still a lottery ticket. And you hear some places, maybe some Wall Street firms, are starting to say, hey, I don't want to hire Ivy League grads because of all the craziness. So I look, I think that it is very healthy right now that we are having a more honest conversation. Uh, you know, like I think both Erica and Jenna have said, go find a school that's a good fit for you, do the honors college, find your people. You can have a
Okay.
Yeah,
Jen.
I would agree with Mike. I think there's a lot of pressure, and that has to do with where we're located. Um, but we've really worked hard at having parents stop and ask themselves a question, what's the goal of college? Like, what am I hoping my child gets out of college? And it's not, I mean, usually that first answer is a job, a good job. But honestly, if they press on it, they want them to find passion and a calling. They want them to become mature adults. They want them to make good friends. They want them to possibly find a spouse. And that helps them think differently about what's the most important criteria when I'm looking at these institutions where my child's going to be really influenced, where they have great potential to grow, or great potential to decline in certain areas, and who's influencing them. So I think just sometimes taking a step back and asking the question, like, what are we hoping for at the end of these 4 years, really? That helps you look at it in a different light, than maybe the cultural pressure around where all of us are located right now.
Erica.
I'm of two minds on this. So I come from a place that was like a pressure cooker, like everybody had the bumper stickers of where their kids were going to college, and it just got worse over time. And then I moved 45 minutes away where I live now in Northern Rhode Island, and it's not like that at all. Like it's just not. So like I have lived in both worlds. I obviously prefer the one where people act normal and not utterly insane on this topic. So I think it is changing, to Mike's point. Like I think we are having better conversations, and I think some people that maybe like 6 years ago would have never imagined their kids applying to certain schools that aren't as whatever prestigious, selective. I think we're seeing more of that. On the other hand, there are definitely very prominent conservatives who have, daily podcasts or whatever that like are like hammering colleges on this, right? Like you would think like that they would never send their kids to these schools that they talk about all the time, and then they'll just like mention offhandedly that they were just touring Brown with their daughter. So I'm not convinced. I do think that there's a sea change. I mean, I didn't used to know any kids that went to like school in the SEC or all these kids in Florida. I could name by name kids I know that are at tons of schools in the South and in Florida. And one of my son's closest friends is at West Point, Mike, as a freshman. So I do think that's changing, but I'm not sure that at the tippy top of this sort of elitism world, I'm not totally sure that it is. So there's definitely a little bit, I don't know if hypocrisy is the word, but a little bit of like, I'm still not ready to cut the cord, I think, for some people. And I'm going to be grappling with this. My son's a junior now. And when you have a really specific interest, like sometimes the schools that have the program you love are not selective schools at all, because the super selective schools don't even have it. So I will let you know where we land on that in the next year or two.
All right. Erica Sanzi, Defending Education, Mike Petrilli, Thomas B. Fordham Institute, Jenna Axelson, the Wilberforce School. Guys, thank you so much for a terrific, I think very practical, just really lively conversation. Wishing you and all of you with us today a great afternoon. Take care.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, guys.